Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Thank you all for your contribution to our discussion last night. It went great, the online discussion we had. Lots of great ideas, and I was very impressed with the takeaways that folks had on teacher passion. It was really powerful. So, as I promised, I have got two videos I'm going to send you, and I'm going to do the first one on teacher presence and also addressing a little bit around the expectations for the Socratic that we're having next week. So these are going to be 10-minute videos. I'm going to do one on this. The second one will be on teacher identity. It'll also talk a little bit about the changes around the young adult novel expectations. So that'll hopefully be coming soon as well. So what I'd like to do is start by looking at the PowerPoint itself, and what I'm going to do is kind of click through the slides. The first few slides are a joke, which doesn't really work through this medium, but hopefully you get the idea. Elementary teachers are passionate about kids, secondary teachers passionate about content, and of course I can testify that college professors are said to be passionate about themselves. So a little something for you there. So we are going to talk about teacher passion and presence, and I want to focus quickly on passion, talk through that a second, and then get to presence. If I'm on slide 9 right now, and Fry talks about passionate teachers as having qualities of caring about ideas and values, this fascination with the potential for growth within people, this depth and fervor about doing things well, and striving for excellence. So these qualities of caring about ideas. I think there's another quote in the book where he talks about a passionate teacher is somebody who is a friend of their students' minds, right? And so how do we as teachers find a way to use that passion that we have to create spaces and opportunities and learning and growth for students that might be reflective of our teacher presence, right? So this quote I like. And then on the next slide, again, I talked about this last week, but these are the sort of 3 foundational roots for passion. One is your content area, 2 being maybe issues facing our world that got you into wanting to become a teacher to begin with, and then the 3rd is about caring about young people and adolescents in this case. So again, as I said in class, these can change where your passion lies, but I think all 3 are very important to think about and to sort of know where you're grounded, because that will help you as a teacher when the work gets difficult to kind of return to that sort of foundational piece of this is what drives me, this is where my passion lies, and hopefully that'll help you sustain long term in this work. Okay, slide 11, he goes through, and what you'll see in our class over the course of this semester is that all of these bullet points listed here will get addressed. And I want us to talk about passionate teaching now because that's the beginning of the course. And I think you'll see that this concept of bringing passion to our work is going to come up again as we go through the semester, talking about these various topics from classroom environment and management to thinking about the game of school, for planning, all assessment, all of that. We want to have this foundation of passion to begin with. On slide 12, one of the sort of challenges with passionate teaching and the sort of some of the paradoxes that exist is this notion that there's a concern that if we are really passionate about our students, are we going to allow them to get by with anything less than their best? Are we going to, are we going to resist the kind of high expectations because we're afraid of them being disappointed or them failing or them being let down? And so clearly, logically, we could say, yeah, if you have passion for your students, then you would have higher expectations. But I think we know that that's ideal, and in the real world, that doesn't always happen. And I think there's a misconception that passionate teachers are always fun teachers. Thinking about teachers who have been really powerful and instrumental in my own life, sometimes it's those ones that I was like terrified of, and they were very intense, and they were very not so friendly and intimidating, and classes were hard, and at the time I might not have necessarily enjoyed it, But I certainly learned a ton from them and came out of those classes with that person's influence on me fully present. And the amount of learning was often a lot more powerful. Um, Going on to slide 13 is where we start talking about teacher presence. And what I would like you to do is pause here and spend some time with this slide. Really try to break it down. There's a lot in this definition. It's a long sentence. A state of alert awareness, receptivity, and connectedness to the mental, emotional, and physical workings of both the individual and the group. Okay, so right there we got a lot. In the context of their learning environments, that's the second part, and the ability to respond with a considered and compassionate best next step. That's the third. So if you break it down like that, spend some time just kind of thinking about each of these different elements. What might it look like? What would the indicators be? And a lot of those came out in the discussion that people shared last night. So it's a dense definition that requires some serious picking apart. So teacher presence. One of the things that I talk about in this PowerPoint is this idea that stage presence, when we think of stage presence, we think of somebody who is very compelling on stage and is, draws attention to themselves, and they just, everyone can't get their eyes off of them. And sometimes to the eyes of the audience, it looks as if that person on stage or that person in the movie is sort of drawing the spotlight on themselves in a way that's maybe artificial, okay? And so I think our notion of stage presence is more along the line of what we talk about, and if we were to look for an analogy in teachers, is that sort of sage on the stage metaphor. The best example I can think of for that is like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, right? So it was his performance as a teacher that captivated the students, and sometimes that's important to do, and to have that ability is certainly useful. But at the end of the day, real learning won't happen unless the teacher creates the conditions for the students to be blowing their own minds, right? So it's not about teachers blowing students' minds. It's about creating conditions so students blow their own minds, because that's how the learning is going to happen. That's how they're going to retain the information. Sometimes we have to begin with the idea of the stage presence or be the sage on the stage, but at some point we have to hand it over to students. And you all did that last night with the discussion board. I felt like you guys were really coming up with some amazing, insightful stuff that I was very impressed by. And I think that's because at a certain point I have to get out the way and let you all do your thing. And you did. So you'll see some other bullet points there about the influence of movies and TVs, and I don't think I need to spend much time on this because you guys really address that in the discussion. But I want to sort of make an argument for a different way of thinking about acting and stage presence. I would actually argue that good actors have certain abilities that I think align closely to the teacher presence definition. So I explored this. I studied at Sandy Meisner School in New York, and was an actor for about 15 years before I became a teacher. And once I became a teacher, I realized that so much of what I was doing and what was working for me was not so much what I learned in my teacher ed program, although that was a good program, but it was more the actor training I had had. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and then I came across that Rader, Roth, and Rogers piece around teacher presence, and it just, to me, it was like, it was echoing what I had thought about in terms of what a good actor is, and what effective acting is. So this definition is acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and in order to do that, you have to be fully present and engaged in the moment with the other person on stage, with your objective. And so I put together a pilot study when I was in grad school, and you can see information about the methods there. We did acting workshops, and we had a bunch of pre-service teachers, but we also had folks from the acting department come over. And then I did interviews and surveys afterwards to see the results. Again, this was just a pilot study. These were the acting exercises that we did. I won't go into all of them now, but I'll just say that they're meant to sort of scaffold you towards being able to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Um, and then these are the findings, and so you can read those yourself in terms of what students had to say and what we found. And these are some quotes that some of them shared, and this would have been after the workshops were over. So they were doing their student teaching at this stage, and these quotes are sort of them making connections between the stuff we did in the acting workshop and what they felt like in the when they were doing their student teaching. So there's some quotes there, quotes on slide 21. So this is still something that very much interests me, and I plan to do a larger study of this down the road, hopefully in the next few years. And if you're interested in learning more about that, we can talk about it. But let's get back to teacher presence. So teacher presence is a hard term to define. I think it's not studied very much because of that. There's not a lot of research on it because it's something that different people have different definitions of. These quotes are things that we've heard people say about teaching, and I think these are examples of when teacher presence is in action. Another term is the term with-itness. Some of you might have heard that before. All of these, I think, are elements of teacher presence, but not necessarily encompassing all of teacher presence. But hopefully these quotes help you sort of better understand about examples you might have that show this. These are some of the quotes that come from the book, or from the chapter that you read on teacher presence, the journal article, and they're connecting other philosophers to teacher presence. And I think these are some good quotes to think about, and it allows us to better understand this concept. Finally, slide 24. These are all of the aspects of why teacher presence is important and what teacher presence involves that hopefully speak to some of you. And I think that all of them are, this last one especially, this balance between being responsible to student needs in the moment and responsible to a curriculum and a lesson plan, is really the tightrope that teachers have to walk, right? And so that's sort of ability to improv within a structure. And so the other piece you're reading for next week by Keith Sawyer, he talks about teaching as an act of structured improvisation. So hopefully these two pieces will be in conversation with each other for you. All right, so that's the first video, and hopefully this will all work this time. Thanks.